The year is 2050. They're making the 35th Five Nights at Freddy's game, and they've gone woke. Freddy Fazbear is now Freddy Transbear, rar. The pizzeria is now a wokeria. Instead of serving pizza, they now just serve cunt.
Fluffal is an interesting archetype to talk about because it's got so much going for it, only for it to be a deck that only has ever gotten a few regional tops. Used by Sora in Arc 5 and debuting in 2014's New Challengers, this series is made up of 3 sub-archetypes, those being Fluffals, Edgeimps, and Frighters, with the thematic identity of mutilating adorable plushies with dangerous tools to create horrifying fusions. While some good and simple OTKs are what the deck was mainly designed to do, a combination of them having some insanely powerful cards like Toy Vendor and Patrick Frightfur, as well as a lack of locks on their cards, allows for this deck to do basically anything you could want it to do, only limited by your imagination and what cards you open. Like Predator Plants, I considered doing this as a Halloween video before losing motivation partway through scripting, but given I basically had everything scripted aside from the intro and outro, I figured I might as well get this done since it'll be a shorter video anyway. Also, I'm not waiting for Halloween to do this because we're about to move on to the Arc 5 V-Jump subscription cards, and there's a good chance we're gonna get at least one of them, so I want to be able to talk about it before I don't get the chance to do it again. It was either that or I just didn't make the video. As always, we'll be starting with the monsters, which means we're actually going to be starting with the manga cards before the anime ones, as there are no unreleased monsters in the anime, while the manga has a Fluffal and 3 Frighters, that only Fluffal being Fluffal Fusionist, which is hands down the ugliest monster in the entire archetype. It's a level 5 pendulum with unknown stats and a scale of 1, and its only effect is that it lets you fusion summon as a pendulum effect. It serves the same purpose to Fluffals that cards like Performapal Trump Witch and Predator Plant Buffalicula do, basically acting like a continuous polymerization that allows you to pendulum summon sometimes. And not really much else since we don't know what else its effects are, and it being a 5 makes it harder to put on the field. Due to the nature of the manga, we can't see what its monster effect was going to be because they didn't write it so they could save on ink, meaning in this pendulum effect is all we have. And the monster effect could really be anything. I will say, even with just a pendulum effect, the card is still neat for the deck, and does have some potential uses. The main benefit to something like this is that it's searchable, but Fluffals have the distinct advantage that their main way of searching this card, Toy Vendor, isn't a once per turn, meaning you can search like 50 times if things go well. Because of this, you'll have a very easy time getting to Fusionist, which can help immensely when it comes to setting up their fusion summons. Though, as a counterpoint, Patrick Frightfur also searches polymerization and gets you an Edgeimp, so it gets you half the fusion material, so the deck's not really hurting for a way to get to a fusion. But still, it's definitely a good start. It's already good on its own, and it can only improve when we get its full effects, so I wouldn't be against seeing this being printed. And now we have the more unusual side of this deck, the main deck Frightfurs. For those unaware, the manga version of Fluffals also had a series of main deck Frightfur monsters that break the typical theming of the deck, being based on plastic toys rather than mutilated plushies. It's a neat idea because it plays into the story with how Sora is actually from the future, so it's representing his deck by having it be futuristic toys. And by futuristic toys I mean plastic toys rather than normal plushies. And we actually did get one of them with Frightfur Meister, but we still have 3 more waiting to be printed on. So let's see what they could do. And the first one up is Frightfur Bone Diver. Oh, also for some reason all of them are water themed. I assume it's because he was dueling in the water. Although that does remind me, what the fuck is Meister supposed to be?
That didn't help at all.
Bone Diver is a level 1 pendulum with a scale of 9, and its monster effect is that when it's destroyed while it's on the field, if your life points are 2,000 or less, double your life points. In contrast to Fusionists, which had a pretty good effect, Bone Diver has a pretty terrible effect. If you happen to be on Death's Door in Fluffals, destroying this card can give you a chunk of life points, which gave Sora 2,000 in the duel it was used in, which is not going to happen in most duels this will actually be used in. I don't think Fluffals of all decks is the one that really needed a life stream dragon. It also doesn't seem to work the way it's written, as this card was destroyed in the Pendulum Zone for an effect, but it didn't trigger the heal despite him being at 2,000. Even though destroying a card in the Pendulum Zone does trigger monster effects that trigger when they're destroyed on the field. That's the reason why Plushfire was so abusable. So that means this effect is either supposed to be destroyed while it's in the monster zone, or if it's destroyed by battle, both of which are not very good. Maybe if it instead gave like 500 life points, I could see this being splashed as a time card. It does have a combo with one of the other Frighters we're gonna talk about, and if it could also trigger when it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, it could be comboed with Cruel Whale. Also, we don't know what its pendulum effect is since this is the monster effect, so that could be something very helpful. But from what we can gather, Bone Diver is not very good. Very easy to see why he ended up becoming Bones with an effect this bad. And now we get to the only one of these cards that actually matters, because it's the one that has the best name of any card in the entire game. Frighters Sad Marine. It's a level 4 monster, though it's not a pendulum this time, and its only effect is that every time your opponent normal summons, they take 800 damage. Yo, this count is fucking flew on the rees. And Monarchs, they're getting new supports. I guess this also could be updated to burn your opponent if they special summon, but I don't think people really want another tax card to be printed, and I don't think Fluffals really need a tax card. Though, interestingly enough, there is an additional change we can make to this card that would be fitting with the duel it was used in, and it's actually involving two cards that won't ever be printed. Those being the action cards Bubble Down and Bubble Bomb Memory. Bubble Bomb Memory just inflicts damage to your opponent equal to damage they took this turn, so realistically we would just double the damage Sad Marine does to 16. But Bubble Down, meanwhile, reduces the attack of an opponent's monster by the amount of damage they took this turn. Realistically, this is not very good, like by any means, but it'd be a cool way of introducing these two effects into the game when they otherwise wouldn't be printed, since we're not getting action cards printed. Not much else to say aside from that, unless they decide to retroactively make this a pendulum monster. But realistically, even if they don't, I just want them to print it because I think the card's funny. The last of the monsters is Frighters Claw Pirate, another level 5 pendulum, this one being a scale 4, and its effect lets you target another card in your pendulum zone, destroy it, and special summon a Frighters from your graveyard with a level less than or equal to destroyed monsters. But its effects are negated. Oh wait, hold on, I wrote earlier that it brings back with a level less than the destroyed monsters. I meant less than the monster's pendulum scale. This was the card I mentioned earlier that you could combo with Bone Diver, being able to bring back any level 9 or lower Frighters monster from your graveyard. I personally don't think the negation is really necessary. Most of the guys you're going to want to bring back are ones you're either going to use for a fusion summon, or you're going to want to be in attack, so putting it in defense mode is already a downside. And keeping the negation would prevent you from using the effects of things like Meister and Kraken, which you really want to do. This is especially the case for Meister, who contribute 2 or more fiends to special summon a Frighters fusion as if it was fusion summoned. Which does bring me to the issue with these 3 cards that I have been ignoring throughout the video until now. These are all Frighters cards, not Edge Imps or Fluffals, Frighters, meaning none of them are valid fusion materials for your fusions. Except for Chimera, but that's like one of the worst ones. That major oversight aside, Claw Pirate can be pretty useful depending on the scale. Some changes I could see being made to it are 1. Letting it also summon back an Edge Imp or Fluffal in case your skills aren't good enough. 2. Letting it pop itself so you can get a level 4 or lower in case you're lacking another scale. And 3. Letting it summon from the extra deck face up in case you have something like a Meister in there who isn't in your graveyard. And I also think this goes without saying, but giving it a monster effect would be very nice. The only spell card I have is Edge Nightmare, which finally gives us an Edge Imp card to talk about. It's a continuous spell that once per turn lets you special summon a level 4 or lower Edge Imp from your graveyard. But if you didn't use this effect this turn, destroy as many cards as you control as possible, and something or other. We can't see the full effect text, so we don't know what the second part of it is. It's basically Predaponics for Edge Imps, which is neat. It would likely need to be treated as a Frighters card so it can be searched off of chains as well as sent by Cruel Whale. And the second effect probably won't be making it onto this card because it's such a dumb effect to include. If it did make it, it would likely just be a self-destruct effect rather than a field wipe. And that's all I've got. It's a very simple effect just like Sad Marine, and there's not really much else to add. Honestly, same goes for Album of Memories, which is a continuous trap which negates 1 attack for every Fluffal in your graveyard. This card actually didn't do anything in the manga, by the way, it got negated. Likely will be treated as a Frighters card like Nightmare, but not much I could see being done with this one. Maybe it could have an effect based on reaction draw, where if it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect you can draw a card. That way, if you send it to the graveyard with Cruel Whale, you could possibly draw it to a hand trap, similar to how you can send something like Garura to draw. But other than that, it's not very interesting. Frighters Change of Memory activates when your opponent activates an effect that would target one of your monsters. You special summon a Frighters unit from your deck, then that card becomes the target instead. A Frightfur unit, by the way, is basically just a manga term to encapsulate Fluffals, Edgems, and Frightfurs, as shown by the manga effect of Frightfur Meister. Anyway, it's alright. Being able to redirect an effect can be decent, especially since it can summon anything from Bone Diver to Chains, allowing you to protect your own guys while potentially plussing off their graveyard effects, provided the effect that was being changed was a destruction one and not like a banish one. And speaking of a banish effect, I don't actually think this card's graveyard effect would be one. Instead, I think it would get the ability to reset itself in reference to the Revive Bubble action card that was used during the duel, which lets you target a trap you activated this turn and set it, with it being activatable again, which was used to reset this card. Alternatively, if we did make it a banish effect, I could see it letting you reset a Frightfur trap card or a toy vendor, since that's what the deck is based around, but I do think it's probably just going to reset itself. Frightfur Defender, aside from the weird choice in artwork for showing defending, has the effect to prevent a Frightfur from being destroyed by battle or card effect, and gives it 800 attack. Fun fact, this card's effect was adapted into Frightfur Sheep's real world effect, though instead of preventing destruction, it revives itself and gains 800 attack. And that is kind of the problem with this card. We already had it adapted into a real card in some form, so there isn't much to talk about here. I could see it maybe giving protection to all the Frightfur monsters, as well as a stat boost, and of course a graveyard effect because of Cruel Whale, but other than that, I've got not much else to say. The last Frightfur card there is left to talk about is Frightfur Mad Parade, which activates when an effect is activated that would destroy an opponent's card while you control a Frightfur, which causes this card to nuke your opponent's field and burn for 500 per destroyed card. So is there any reason why this card wasn't printed around Cruel Whale's release instead of Toy Parade? This card works so well with Edge and Scythe and the Cruel Whale's effect that it baffles me we never got it. I honestly don't have much else to add here. I think the card is fantastic already for what the deck wants to do. Only thing I would see being changed for it would be giving it a graveyard effect since Cruel Whale can send it. And the idea I have for its graveyard effect would be that it could banish itself to protect a Frightfur fusion you control. Which, yeah, is basically Scythe's effect, but given how this works so well with Whale, I figured I might as well lean into it. Plus, this would mean if you didn't have a way to protect Whale, say your opponent banished your Scythe from graveyard, you could use Whale to send Parade in order to get the protection before the destruction went through, which I think would be a very neat trick you could do. And with that, we have covered the remaining Frightfur cards. Some fairly interesting stuff here, even if I didn't say as much as the other videos due to the nature of these being simpler cards, with not as much to work off of. Sorry for this being a bit of a shorter video, but what can you do? Name's Error? Thanks for watching.